A bear did cocaine. It's a true story.
No. I am the father.
And here we go.
That belongs in a museum.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
This is Sparta!
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Easily Entertained. I'm your host, Bryson, and we talk about all things entertaining, whatever that may be. This time, we're talking about Cocaine Bear, which is the new movie that just came out last week, which is based, sort of, on a true story. It was directed, and the movie was directed and produced by Elizabeth Banks. It's a comedic, like, horror style kind of film. It's not exactly very much horror. It's very much comedic, but it was hilarious. It was so funny. So, as you can expect, it's about a bear who does cocaine. And this was a real story. So I think before we really talk fully about the movie, let's talk about what the actual story was. So back in 1985, specifically September, there was a drug smuggler. His name was Andrew Thornton, and he was smuggling a crap ton of cocaine back to the U.S. And he was flying over the Appalachian Mountains, like the Chattahoochee Forest. And so he was flying out there, and he thought the FBI was tracking him. And so he decided to dump 40 plastic containers of cocaine from the plane just into the forest, and then he ditched the plane. And so there was just cocaine lying around in the forest. And this bear got into it. It was found 2 months later, and it was just dead. It died of a cocaine overdose, which, shocker, because it was so much cocaine. It was found, when it was found, so the bear was 200 pounds, and it ate 75 pounds of cocaine. So they had found it, and they did an autopsy and everything. It was filled to the brim. Its stomach was completely filled with cocaine. So naturally, this bear that is only 200 pounds, of course, just died as soon as it got into the cocaine. There was no way it was going to live out that long. But because of this story, they nicknamed it Pablo Escobar, based off the notorious drug lord Pablo Escobar, which I think is so funny. I didn't realize that until I was researching it a little bit for this episode, that was its nickname. I knew the story was real, that a bear had gotten into cocaine, but of course it overdosed because it was so much. There's no way it would have lived. But so the movie basically is, what if the bear didn't die when it did cocaine, and what could happen if a bear was on cocaine and still conscious. And so basically the whole movie is this bear gets into cocaine and goes on a rampage to try and get more cocaine and just kill as many people as possible. And so it's kind of hilarious. It's very much what you'd expect. You're not expecting the most amazing film ever. It's not meant to be a masterpiece of cinematography. You're not trying to find some hidden meaning. And it's oh, this is why you shouldn't do cocaine. You just shouldn't. But having a bear doing it just makes it hilarious. And because it is something that did actually happen, it just didn't go on a rampage. It just died because it was so much cocaine. And so the movie, it's just, so this bear gets into cocaine, and then it kills like this camper, like these two campers. And then like there's a subplot with these kids that were kind of like out hanging out in the forest, and then they come across the bear. The kids don't die, of course, because it's just meant to be a fun movie. And so like it's just going through, and the like drug lords who like we're gonna get the cocaine, they were like, okay, well now we need to find it. And then they're like searching, and they're kind of using the bear as like a form of like tracking it, because now the bear is addicted to cocaine, and so they have to try and find it. It's so ridiculous of a premise, and it's like the whole movie you're just watching people being mindlessly ripped apart, mainly because like they have like traces of cocaine or drugs on them, and so the bear can sniff it out, and they're just like cocaine, and then just goes and kills them. It's so dumb. It was such a ridiculous movie, but it was so funny, and like the child actors were pretty good. The little boy especially was hysterical, because there's a line that's in one of the trailers where he's like, I hope I forget this, but this seems like something that will stick with a man forever. Oh, it's just so funny. And it's not like something that you have to really put a lot of thought into. It's just one that you can go and enjoy. I think it would be especially fun to watch it with friends, because people can just make fun of it as it goes along. But what's so entertaining to me was like some of the audience members were hysterical. My favorite one was at the very end. So at the very end of the movie, it's supposed to have like this happy ending. So the bear is like a mama bear, and there's like two cubs. They're also addicted to cocaine. But so then it ends with like I'm having like this happy ever after kind of thing, which is hilarious that they did it this way. The bear lives, by the way, in the movie. They don't kill the bear. They just kill like the drug lord, which is hilarious. And then the bear leaves everybody alone. Oh, it was so funny. And then, so at the very end, we have this happy ending, and it leaves off with they never found all of the cocaine in the forest. They suspect that there was some still left out there, and that they didn't find all of it. And the people behind me, they were like, we should go to that forest. We should be heading out there, because free cocaine, whether for ourselves or we can sell it. It was just so entertaining. And like, it's like clearly it's a ridiculous premise, and I think that's kind of what got a lot of people to go see it, because ridiculous premises can really just get you attached, and you're like, okay, I don't got to take this movie very seriously, so I can just go into it not expecting much and just have a good time. I feel like a lot of movies tend to be that way. I think horror especially gets to this genre, because a lot of horror concepts are just ridiculous, I think. And I think you kind of have to make a lot of it comedic so that people can get through it. Because I feel like for me with horror, I want to usually watch with friends, or I make fun of it while I'm watching it, because it is like a coping mechanism for being scared. So you're like, nah, I'm gonna make fun of it so that I don't actually feel terrified anymore. And so it's that kind of concept I feel like plays a lot into horror movies, and this movie especially. And it's like super over dramatized, because it is based very loosely on a true story of where a bear actually did get into some cocaine. And I think it's like a good what if scenario, because I think a lot of true story movies, they try to like go really in depth, but that's because a lot of true story movies, they have a lot of depth to them. This true story is almost like a concept, really. Like, it's hard to believe that a bear just got into cocaine and died of overdose. And so I kind of went into the movie actually expecting the bear, like, by the end to just ingest so much that it just dies. Because I knew that's how, like, the actual bear went out, was just it overdosed way too much. And so that's what I was kind of expecting. But because, like, this true story, it's not super in-depth. No one actually died in the true story. It didn't go on a rampage. In fact, it probably got to the cocaine and died within like 30 minutes. If that, because it was so much. It was so much. If you could imagine a person doing that, they would die like instantly. It would not take that long. So it's something that I just don't think could be super fleshed out if it was fully the true story. Because I think of other true stories like Hacksaw Ridge. That's a really good true story kind of movie, but there's a lot of detail, and they talk to people who were actually there and the family and stuff like that. They had a lot of documentation and detail to go into that kind of true story. Or you have like horror movie true story like The Conjuring. They say they're true stories. Lorraine and Ed Warren were real people. I think they are still alive or close. I don't know. But they like were real people, and they have these encounters and recordings of these like demonic presences. And so they had a lot of detail to go off of for these horror movies. And so they could actually really get into it and like recreate it for a horror movie concept. However, this movie, it's so short of a true story. So you kind of, and like most true stories, they do get over dramatized a little bit because you're trying to sell the audience and you want to kind of amplify like the emotion a little bit and get people invested, and maybe you have to change up a couple things just so it fits like what people's perceptions are. And so you kind of have to do that with true stories sometimes, but it's not usually done to this extent really, because it's a very short concept essentially, because a bear got into cocaine, it overdosed. It's that simple. So in this scenario, although it's quote unquote based on a true story, they kind of have to just make up a lot of it and really over dramatize it so that it's good for an audience. Because like the story is interesting for sure. And because like you're not going to normally hear about a bear getting into drugs and like just overdosing, because that doesn't happen. People do that, but animals don't usually. And so you really have to over dramatize it and add a lot of things, because it's like, oh, okay, let's make the bear bigger than it was, because in the movie it's like a 500-pound bear. It's way bigger. And it's a mama bear, so it's kind of a bit more aggressive because it has babies and it rips people apart. And if they're covered in traces of cocaine because they found cocaine in the woods, it's like, oh, I'm going to kill them because they got cocaine all over them. And so it's like trying to feed that addiction, and then it sniffs the cocaine off their limbs. And so you have that, and then you have like more of a human-based story with like the kids and like the mom trying to find the kids. And so you have that aspect to it that kind of brings you through the story. You can follow human characters while also finding out how this bear is doing cocaine. And so you have to dramatize it a little bit to have a movie. You have to do that to do visual storytelling, like to that extent, because the movie is about, I think, an hour and a half long. It's a very short movie, at least by today's standards, because I feel like everything's like 2.5 hours now. But so it's like a very short movie, and to draw it out that long, you have to make up some stuff and do a what if scenario so that you can actually make it into a movie. Because the real story, it's like a minute long to explain as like a news wrap kind of thing. And so you're not really in the same realm that way. Because for one part, it was just like a report that just happened. But with this, you're trying to sell tickets and make money. And so you have to really over dramatize it. But I think what's kind of funny is then it kind of brings up other things. So like I've seen some spoof stuff. I don't know if it's actually real or if they're like making parodies, but I saw like on Twitter, what was it? The Asylum. I think they're like a little producing company. They had one that was like Attack of the Meth Gator, which is going to come out, which I think is hilarious. But what I think could be funny with like these short true stories that could be over dramatized and brought out into full length movies are every Florida Man report ever. I think all of those could be made into short, like hour and a half long movies of just how ridiculous their concepts are. Because I think those are in like the same realm of true stories, because they're just ridiculous enough that it almost doesn't seem real, but they're based in reality and they do actually happen. Like it's like Florida Man tosses Gator through Wendy's trying to rob them, like from the one like Shane Smith comedy bit. That I think could be a hilarious like short movie if you drew it out long enough. You're like, okay, so what if this happened? Because we only know like so much, so you kind of like over dramatize it. You're like, how did he get the Gator? What made him think I should rob a Wendy's with this? And then the aftermath of it. And so I think those are kind of in the same realm of what they could be. So I think with that could be like a fun little thing that kind of gets started because of this movie, because it's just a short story, a short true story that's like really drawn out and made into like a what if kind of scenario. I think that could be like a new trend that comes up. I don't know necessarily if in Hollywood in particular, but I feel like a lot of independent studios and creators could do that with those short true stories like Florida Man and those kind of things, or you get like the local kind of crazy people type true stories that aren't like big enough to make national or worldwide news, but enough that it's interesting in concept and you can try and draw it out and over dramatize it just to make it a little fun movie. 1 second, I need some water. I need to hydrate. Y'all hydrate. I'm dying. But yeah, I think that could like start a fun little new trend of movies, which I think would be great. I would probably do something of that nature because I'm trying to build my reputation as director and like make movies and stuff. Reputation, like a portfolio, that's what I meant to say. But I just find it interesting because the whole movie is based off such a small concept. But I love that Elizabeth Banks took it to the extreme. They're like, what if a bear did cocaine and like did similar things to what people do when they're on cocaine, which is go just nuts. So I think in that aspect, it can make it really entertaining. And so, yeah, I kind of like it. And I think we could see a new trend of short, true stories being made into films and being like drawn out way past what they were meant to be and just like being fun little entertaining things. I think that is exciting. But yeah, I think you should go see Cocaine Bear if you haven't already, because it's hysterical. It's so ridiculous. You're just going to have a fun time watching it. Don't go into it expecting it to be a master of cinematography. And so, yeah, it's just a fun, easily entertaining kind of movie. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Easily Entertained, and tune in for the next episode. Yeah, that was a weird outro, but that's okay. Thank you for listening to Easily Entertained with me, Bryson Olson. If you enjoyed, be sure to tune back in Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We're available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and really anywhere else you get your podcasts. And for the latest updates on anything entertaining, check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for all those latest updates. And until next time, this is Easily Entertained.